So Shazam, Fury of the Gods is the sequel to 2019 Shazam from a few years ago. I saw Fury of the Gods over the weekend and I'm going to be doing a review for it. Now I, like many, loved the first Shazam. It was a very pleasant, charming, spirited movie and very different in tone from most of the other movies in the DCEU up to that point. It's between the first Shazam and the first Wonder Woman as the best films in the DCEU for me. Box office wise, the film did good, but not great numbers. Did get a $366 million worldwide against a $100 million budget, so it made a solid profit for Warner Brothers. But I'm guessing the studio, Warner Brothers in this case, figured that the film was praised by many, and because of that, a sequel would surely do better money-wise. I'll talk more about that later. In Shazam, Fury of the Gods, Billy Baxton and his family of foster brothers and sisters are enjoying lives as God-bearing heroes, but things get interrupted when three queenly gods from another realm arrive in our world to enact revenge on the human race. Now, forget about whatever next-level mythical plots or subplots that this film and the first Shazam had. The word that best described the first Shazam is fun. The whole concept of giving godlike powers to teens will enact a whole bunch of shenanigans, and that was properly portrayed in the first film with its tone and whatnot. That same tone and feel is obviously done with this one, which makes sense because that's what people loved about the first one, with that kind of humor and stuff. With that, you get the same kind of humor here and all the kind of stuff that goes with giving godlike Superman powers plus the kid personalities with these people here, and that's what you need if you're going to do another Shazam. Zachary Levi is once again perfect in this role of Shazam. That kind of personality that he has, plus when he really puts on his Flynn Rider voice, he's a really entertaining guy in this. That was actually part of the only notable problem with the first film. In the first film, Billy Baxton, when he's his normal teenage self, he's relatively quiet and reserved, that kind of guy. But when he's his Shazam self, he's pretty juvenile and a lot more boisterous. In this movie, Fear of the Gods, their personalities align a bit more in this one, although it almost doesn't matter, because Billy Baxton in his teenage form is barely in this film, especially once you get to the second half film, where it's pretty much all him exclusively as his Shazam self. Not entirely surprising, since obviously you get Zachary Levi, he's the star of the film, so he's the one that's going to get the most screen time here. When it comes to the rest of the foster kids, Freddy is the one seen the most outside of his Shazam form. Freddy, he's an entertaining guy, still got the same kind of personality, humor, and charm to him and whatnot, and, he was fine, whatever. As for the rest of the kids, you got Darla, who is still adorable. Love that little girl. She's so much fun, so charming, just so pleasant in this movie. There's that Asian kid who didn't have really much to say or do in the first film, and he doesn't really have much to say or do in this film either. You have Pedro, who is the plumpy kid, and he barely had any lines in the first film and this one too. He has a story revelation about himself that other studios, Disney, would probably do in a cringe fashion. And while this kind of storyline feels forced a lot of times in movies these days, the way it was done here was actually kind of sweet in the same scene that it plays out. And I actually didn't mind that kind of storyline in this. Mary is the foster kid that caught my eye for the obvious reasons. She's just a gorgeous woman, the actress that plays her. It's a very interesting decision, though, to have her in this one, her Shazam self be the same as her normal self. They did recast her Shazam self from the first film, but wow, I don't mind. The actress is just drop dead gorgeous, and I definitely didn't mind her seen on screen in this film. The character herself, Mary, has a lot more kind of, attitude this kind of round, and almost kind of a fuck off, leave me alone kind of way. Kind of forced in some parts, but it is what it is. Didn't really hurt. Now, the first film had a decent bad guy in Dr. Thaddeus, whatever his last name was, played by Mark Strong. He's actually a pretty solid bad guy. In this film, your main sort of antagonistic kind of role, in terms of your newcomers, are the three godly sisters from the other realm, the Daughters of Atlas, played by Helen Mirren, Lucy Liu, and Rachel Zegler. These three warrior queens, whatever, each have their different motivations in terms of the main plot. These three were fine in this movie. Mirren and Lucy Liu have more antagonistic type roles. It's amazing they got Helen Mirren for this role because her character has a lot of action scenes, so it's like, god damn. I know it's not Helen Mirren throughout all doing these stunts, but you see a decent amount of her during some of these fight scenes. It's like, whoa, that lady, she's still putting in that work. When it comes to the three sisters, Zegler's character is more neutral than anything. She is also part of one of the most unbelievable, and I mean unbelievable in a yeah right kind of romance as you'll ever see. Can't say I love that part of the movie. It did feel kind of forced and, like I said, very unbelievable. But I do love Rachel Zegler. She's definitely a real sweetheart in sort of real life, and her character is kind of a sweetheart in this one too. Plot wise, I thought the middle of the movie was just going through a lot of ups and downs when it came to being stagnant, silly plot devices like a dome that comes over the city, Simpsons movie style. And really, the only thing that I was enjoying were those charming parts that came with the first film in terms of the humor and whatnot. Because, like I said, that middle of the movie, kind of up and down. When the final act comes in, that's where the film, in my opinion, differs the most from the first Shazam. In the first Shazam, despite being a film dealing with, Superman-esque powers, it was pretty small in scale and spectacle. And that was fine, because the movie didn't really need to go all out when it came to that kind of stuff. This movie goes all out in its final act, with massive destruction level events, spectacle, effects, and fights. The initial problem is that the whole reason why all this big sort of spectacle at the end is happening is through what feels like a last minute plot device that had nothing to do with the reason these initial 3 Queen warriors even came to Earth. Just kind of comes out of nowhere, really. The actual fights and spectacle that happened in that last 30 to 40ish minutes has some decent stuff. There's a fun bit that involves the foster kids that makes for great advertising for a certain brand. The effects are okay. I guess for me it just went on a little too long. Especially that final quote-unquote boss fight, which is just so goddamn repetitive and uninteresting, and I was just waiting for it to be over, despite me not having a terrible time with the movie up until that point. The movie does have a great payoff at the end that was apparently spoiled in recent TV spots. I didn't see or know about the surprise at the end when I saw this movie, so I got the intended effect it was supposed to have, which was a fun one. I would hope that others that see this movie can get that kind of effect too, but based on recent advertising, I don't know if that will be the case. There were some other decent sort of story payoffs throughout the movie also. I guess I had a solid time with the movie. Compared with Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, it's more earnest, I guess, in its storytelling. It continues the first film's, family message, sort of Fast and Furious style. I guess it's just not all the bombast and spectacle works in this. While you still get the first film's sort of fun atmosphere, most of the time anyway. Unlike that first film, though, you're dealing with more of an epic style story that's really just kind of middle of the road. But again, Zachary Levi's still charming performance, family camaraderie dynamic, and those payoffs that the film had at the end, which again, I was not spoiled about going in, were enough to give this film a 7 out of 10. Like I said, it's an okay time, solid time for the most part. Now, the time that I'm doing this review, opening weekend has already passed, and the film's box office receipts came out for its opening weekend. And yikes, the film only made $30 million on its opening weekend. $30 million on a $125 budget. Just all kinds of disastrous, especially given the fact that the first Shazam made $53 million opening weekend in 2019. And it's even worse than that because inflation prices really are real right now. And so $30 million doesn't even mean what $30 million meant in 2019. That's how bad this did. It's a really bad performance, and the only things that I can come up with for how bad it did, it was tracking to do bad, but it did even worse than those original sort of tracking numbers, is that, this and, how Black Adam kind of underwhelmed a lot of audiences, I guess, and you can tell by the box office too. That didn't help. Plus, the first Shazam, it's not like it was a huge hit. Everyone that saw it really liked it. But it might be one of those films that was really just kind of a one-off for people, and no one really had any real interest in seeing the story continue further, even if the creators had more ideas to throw out from the comics and all that kind of stuff. But also something that's a major role here is that, this is the first DCEU film to come out since the announcement came out a few months ago that they're essentially going to be rebooting the whole thing. With James Gunn being the new creative head of the DC films going forward, they're going to do a whole nother universe, and every single one of these DCEU films that comes out this year, it's basically a dead man walking, meaning that these stories are going to go nowhere. Where you have later on this year, The Flash, you have Aquaman and the Last Kingdom, and then you have Shazam, Fury of the Gods. All three of these movies are going to be the end of the road for the DCEU, with only The Flash probably playing a role in actually setting up the future of the films going forward, just not in the current universe. So with that, and maybe a decent amount of audiences that have heard about that news and just thinking, well, what's really the point here? I might have seen the first Shazam and had a fun time with it, but it's not the kind of thing that I think needs super eager to go see a continuation, especially given the fact that, it's that era of DC films is coming to a close. I also think that with the whole thing that shows why DC has to reboot is the fact that, whatever, I'm still not going to spoil what the surprise is at the end of this film. But the fact that they felt the need to put that in the advertising and it still didn't work and sort of boosting up the box office, like I said, $30 million. I mean, that's less than Morbius made last year. That tells you how bad that box office is. Those kind of box office receipts show why DC is rebooting. And when people ask, well, why the hell are they doing a Joker sequel? Well, because that's really the only sort of bona fide, sort of real, if you don't also count the Batman, one of the few bona fide hits they've had over the last handful of years. So, of course, they're going to do a sequel to that one. And when you do a sequel to Shazam and it only makes $30 million, well, maybe they're spending their money in the wrong place. So there you have with that box office. Quite disastrous, but won't really mean much forward for the future of Shazam, despite whatever mid and post credit scenes they have in this, which whether the second one or the first one would have been something interesting to see going forward, but you're not going to see that. So it is what it is. So that'll do it with this review of Shazam: Fury of the Gods. If you made it to the end of this video, thank you for watching.